Now we live. All right, so welcome everyone. It's Friday the 13th. Hopefully you had a blessed day today and none of the headaches associated with what you might maybe associate with Friday the 13th. This is Richard with Opulent, and we have here as a guest Tanner. He is a awesome resource, wealth of knowledge. I think we know each other now since 5 years, something like that. And he's a denturist in Alberta. And I brought him on here today for all of us to, we already can see the equipment in the background, talk about the equipment a little bit. How is he using it? What materials is he using? Restoration types he's making. Maybe he gives us a little tour of the place, a little virtual one. You know, I'm eager to learn a little bit more about his printer, what he has, where he seems to have good success with it. And yeah, just chit chat a little bit on a Friday. We, as per usual, have about 30 minutes, maybe 60 minutes if we need them. But if we're running out of stuff to chit chat about, then so be it. And who knows, maybe we're going to share the screen and pull the case up on his end or on my end, or I don't know, totally open. Today's Friday. Let's keep it easy. So maybe Tanner wants to introduce himself for a moment really quick. How's that?
Sure. Thanks, Richard. So my name is Tanner. I own a practice, a denturist clinic in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. It's called the Alberta Denture Clinic. I've had it here probably for about 18 years. And about approximately just over 6 years ago, I purchased some AG, the cerebral motion system at that time. One of the main reasons I purchased it was for the fixed restoration work. I wanted to get more into milling my own substructures and crowns and bridges of that nature, neck guards at that time. So I got to know Richard, like you said, about 5 years ago. I think it was through Mo Whitlock. I had some technical questions and I needed some answers. So I spoke with Richard about them, and I still keep in contact with them all the time, just about various things. And yeah, so that's basically my background in that part. And I don't know.
Awesome. So it's all Mo's fault if you're listening, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully, I don't even remember what we chatted about, but hopefully I helped you out and fixed your stuff what you had.
Yeah, still to this day, I'm always trying to push the envelope with new materials and new concepts, and I run into issues, technical issues, or just stuff that happens when you're pushing the limits like that. So I always use Richard as a resource, or anybody that I can, to try to figure things out when I get stuck. Sometimes it goes the other way around as well. But anytime you get into this kind of realm of technology, a lot of it's new and it comes with its hiccups, and it takes time to learn the workflows and to get really versed on them.
How long did it more or less, you would say, take you until, like, from the point when you bought the equipment until you felt more comfortable with things and didn't entirely freak out anymore about, oh my God, I bought all this stuff and it's like over my head or whatever?
Yeah, so like I can answer that question in two ways. Like, because I had never owned milling technology before that, I had a scanner but no milling technology. I think it took me like 250 hours, I would say, on the mill before I really felt comfortable with just everything. And then as you grow with that, like 500 hours, you become even more versed and experienced with the mill. I'm sure anybody who has a mill knows that. And then it just becomes secondhand by probably you got 1,000 milling hours under your belt. I would say that, those are good protocols to kind of figure out how versed somebody would be on the technology at a certain time point. And it would depend on how long it takes you to get to that 250 hours as well.
Right.
because it can take people more time than others, because it can be harder for other people. But to make that initial investment, and to really start seeing the productivity out of it, to get your workflows down pat, to get the concepts where you want them, to try to shift yourself from an analog to a digital state in the practice, that takes time, right? Because you have to start to think outside of the box on how to transform yourself into this more digital realm. And I think it takes a couple of years. As somebody starting just green, I think you need to plan that. Maybe you still keep some of your analog approach for a while and slowly transition yourself into a digital approach as you get more and more comfortable with it. But to really start to see the fruits of the technology, it can take a couple of years, because and I think people's expectations sometimes are a little bit too high, because they're being sold Mount Everest, they're being sold something really, really high, and they got these really high expectations, and this trainer's going to come in there and show them how to completely transform their practice in their office into this digital workflow. And I don't think that. I think that's really unreasonable for people to have those expectations. I think it's unreasonable for companies to sell those expectations. So I think it takes time.
Yeah. Do you remember your first restoration? What you made?
I did. It was a bit of a problem. I know Mo Whitlock did my training at that time, and I had a bunch of stuff set up for him, and it was too much. Like, when I look back on it, how much I had on our plate just for the 3 or 4 days that we were together was a lot. Yeah. But again, I was sold these, not from AG and not from Mo at that time, but the retailer that sold me the equipment. They tell you it can do everything. It can give birth to children. I don't know. They say it can do a lot of things that really takes a lot of time and experience. So when Mo was here, I had a fixed restoration case. I wanted to mill a substructure, thimble pontics and crowns. And at that time, 6 years ago, the software didn't even really have it didn't actually have a workflow for that. You had to know workarounds. Right. So, we really struggled with that case, and it wasn't successful in the beginning. That workflow, it took me probably another 3 months to kind of figure out a good, successful workflow at that time to do a thimble pontic fixed restoration. But that was
implant borne on.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think it was on 6 implants. It was a single upper.
Yeah.
But
had a crazy restoration to hey, that's my first one to jump in.
Yeah. And my mindset,
especially like you're saying 6 years ago.
Yeah, and my mindset at that time was that I kind of wanted to close the loophole, right? Because I was sending everything to the lab, and I wasn't necessarily always getting what I wanted, and that wasn't their fault. It was nobody's fault. It was just that they weren't working on that patient. They weren't designing those surgical guides, getting the implant placements. There's a bit of a gap there. So at that time, it took time for me to realize that I needed to try to learn this stuff, and I knew there was going to be a large learning curve. But that's why I did it. I purchased the equipment to do those kinds of restorations. I didn't purchase it for anything else at that time, because at that time, the AG system didn't come with milling a PMMA puck. It was only there to mill the wax, right? You'd mill the wax, and you would still conventionally analog process that.
For the dentures, yes. So it did for temporaries. It did have PMMA and or temp shaded PMMA, right? But yeah, you mean the pink, right?
Yeah, I think I got the system. I can't remember when, but it was probably about 8 to 10 months later before I was able to develop some sort of workaround to start milling the denture bases. And still, it always had the option of putting the DD set frame teeth into the mill. and milling the basal surface of the teeth. And then you would just mill out the wax puck, and you would use that for a try-in and then pro. So it did, 6 years ago. I know now it's vastly changed, but back then, you were still doing wax ups and you were still doing those setups by hand. So that really eliminated all of that work. So it really helped. But anyway, the reason why I bought the equipment was to do the fixed restoration work. So, but now when I look at it, to ask somebody to come in back then for 4 days to train you on that kind of equipment to do those kinds of restorations was crazy. Like, that's a lot to ask. It was really a lot to ask.
Yeah, different story definitely than what it normally is on the CAD/CAM Basic, right? You're like, okay, let's do a single crown, and
Yeah.
there. So definitely, I can
Yeah,
see.
yeah. Like, if you're purchasing this stuff and you're getting someone to come in to operationally train you on how to use the equipment,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're getting a secondary training for someone to come on to show you how to do, a crown. Well, it's going to be fantastic for you. You're not really asking a lot for the trainer or the equipment especially now with the state that a lot of the softwares are at. You're not asking a lot at all. But to go in there and say, we're going to spend, unless you're going into a large lab or practice where that office has lots of milling experience and scanning experience, and now they're transitioning to this equipment, and we need you to come and train us on, because we want to do fixed restoration work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a little bit different, right? And now it's a little bit different too, because now you can implement more digital stuff into those workflows. So they're not as technologically advanced as they were 6 years ago.
Right.
So I just think that it's, that's kind of the background of why I purchased the equipment at that time.
What has changed over the time when you got into digital? Like, did it hopefully got all easier? Although there was a learning curve. What's the good and the bad? What's the improvements and what's the things what you wish would have changed and which haven't?
Well, I think people need to understand the amount of work that you have to put into it, because the workflows just don't come out of anywhere. You have to do lots of research. You have to think about how this stuff is going to work. You end up wasting time and money because sometimes you try things and they don't work. But every year there's always an advancement. That's the thing about digital technology. There's always new updates and there's always new advancements. Mm-hmm. So your life actually does get easier all the time because there's something new that comes out. And mind you, not all the time is it great and is it perfect, or does it not come with problems, but something new does come out. And when it does come out, it just puts you another step up. And so you learn more, you become more advanced and more efficient, and you end up getting better and better results. It's like every patient that walks, this is another problem that I had. So I wasn't a high volume office. It was all referred based, so I didn't advertise. And when a patient would come here and was referred here, they wanted a 10 out of 10. And so did the next referral, and the next referral after that, and after that. Just like everybody knows, when you're doing work on patients, everybody wants a 10 out of 10. The problem that they forget is that you're a human being. And when you're using all analog approach, not everybody's getting a 10 out of 10. This person might get a 7, this one might get an 8. Yeah. Maybe you bomb something and you do a 5 and you gotta redo it to get it to a 10. So that's really what really used to bother me, because I wanted everybody to get this level of perfection that patient A did or patient B got. Mm-hmm. So one of the other reasons why I wanted to implement the technology was to try to create a workflow that was repeatable. So if I created a workflow that was an 8 out of 10, I could do an 8 out of 10 for everybody.
Yeah.
So the technology does that for you, because if you can establish a workflow with the proper materials and the proper technology, you can get every patient an 8 out of 10. Or if you get it even better, a 9 or a 10 out of 10, because that's how repeatable it is. And a lot of people, that's the difficulty in private practice, is giving everybody that same level of treatment.
Totally. Let's talk about materials a little bit. We already touched on that a little bit. I would love to hear, what are your thoughts on the Amann-Girrbach denture system versus others? What are the teeth? What are you using, and maybe why? What's your whole thought on open versus closed? And in the case of Amann-Girrbach, to be frankly, semi-closed, right? It's not fully open, but you can stick other stuff in the middle if you want to experiment. So what's your take on that?
So I think I chose the right, because I know when I made my choice to purchase AG, I made it to do the fixed restoration work. I didn't buy it for the denture part of it. That was kind of like a little bit of icing on the cake. But I am happy to know now that I do feel like I did buy the best workflow for making dentures as well. And the reason I say that is of the carded teeth. Like, these companies put a lot of time and effort into the development of these teeth, the materials, the look of them, the molds, everything, their expansion, their contraction, everything that they put into those teeth, like the wearability of them, the aesthetics in the patient's mouth, what sticks to them, the contours, the translucencies, like everything. And that was really important to me, because a lot of the systems that were out there you were milling a horizontal layered puck. And to me, that I didn't believe in that from the beginning. I believed you needed some form of carded tooth that you could put into the denture base. And sometimes initially, the digital denture bases and bonding the teeth was difficult. But I really do find that the Vita Bionic bond it's rather expensive, and I think the portions of it could be a bit better. But I've had really good results with it. As long as you follow their instructions carefully, that bond has worked very well to bond carded teeth to denture bases.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
So, I would recommend, that product. I know it's like $50 Canadian to buy it. But you could get 4 or even 5 if you're fast enough, or maybe even 6 dentures out if you're really quick. And that bonder, I think, works, for me, it's the main bonder that I use. Okay. But to use the AG system and that workflow and be able to use the carded teeth, you got a few options. Like, I don't believe that the AG system is closed at all, because, you can use whatever you want. And you just have to think about how you're going to use that product. Like, for example, if I wanted to use candular teeth, and there's no DD framed carded teeth that go into the mill. But let's say, for example, I chose a patient that had great interocclusal distance, and I used the candular teeth with the AG system, which you can do. You can use the exocad libraries with it, so that's not a problem. You don't need to mill the backs of those teeth. So
can you, I see it right behind you. Can you grab that D-set holder for me and hold it up? Because maybe not everybody knows what you're talking about with the D-set teeth and what that is.
Yeah, so this is the D-set holder, and what they have is the same carded teeth, like, teeth you would buy from Vita, but they have them in these specific frames that sit inside this arm here. And the reason for it is that if you say you're doing a single upper denture, or you're doing a set of dentures with limited interocclusal distance, you can load these teeth with those frames into this arm here, and you can mill not only occlusally on singles for full dynamic occlusion, or you can mill the teeth on the basal surface so that you get that perfect fit into the base. But that's a manufactured carded teeth. That's a manufacturer that spent a lot of time in the materials, the concepts, and the look of these teeth. It's far superior than taking a puck or printing teeth and bonding that to the base. And this is something I say to Richard all the time. The level of patient acceptance in the technology that you're buying and the workflows that you're creating is far more important than anything else in this equation. So if I was to take this set of teeth and mill them with this and bond them to that denture base, the patient acceptance rate would be a lot higher than any printed teeth that you would get out there, and a lot higher than any puck milled teeth. They've already done the work. They've already done the work for you. You just have to do the manufacturing part of it. So that's why I believe I chose the best denture system, is because of the carded teeth. And with exocad itself, you can do that. And there are workarounds for that. Like you can make jigs where you can mill the basal surface of the teeth. And so it's not like the AG system is closed at all. Like I might select the Vita Bionic denture base to mill, but it's a 30 millimeter by 98 millimeter puck. You could use other 30 millimeter by 98 millimeter pucks. It's not stopping you from doing that. And now recently AG has come out with the iVotion base in there, which I use all the time anyway, because I do like their pucks, the preference. So you got a lot of options out there. So anybody who says that it's a closed system, it just tells me that they don't know a lot about digital workflows and digital technology, because that's not true at all. It's not closed. It's only as closed as your mind is, or what they're selling you. It's as open as you can think it to be. I've used all kinds of teeth, from Vita teeth, Harris Kalzer, to MERS. MERS makes frame teeth for this. So does Harris Kalzer. Those are the three ones that you would get with the AG component, along with Vita. But I've downloaded multiple different kinds of exocad libraries and used them in the system. Now, if you're doing an immediate denture case that requires you to mill a large portion of the basal surface, you're going to have to use some sort of frame teeth that go into here to really to help you. And people might think that this is very expensive, but it's not, when you think of the level of patient acceptance you're going to get with that, and how productive you're going to be, how accurate it's going to be, less chair time you're going to have, and just an overall better product. So you might think it's more expensive than a traditional analog approach, but if I made 3 sets of dentures versus 1, it wouldn't be more expensive at all.
That's awesome. I love that. How about, I mean, I already know the answer, but I kind of want to, if I'm just saying exocad, you're using the Cerama version, right?
Yep.
You're using, yep, Cerama, but it's exocad, right? So
Yeah.
different materials already in there, but technically one thing can go into the other and vice versa. So maybe to clarify that, we had a request at some point here, somebody had generic exocad and they wanted to know, hey, if I get the motion 2, can I still do this? And I've tried it out with you actually.
Yeah.
I designed it on my generic exocad here, what I have, and send you the files over, and it ended up working. The only thing is that you need to import the dental CAD file instead of the STL file, because there's no third-party import option for it. But yeah, it all works.
I tend to think this whole closed versus open thing has a lot to do with the resellers and the companies, because I bought a Rapid Shape printer, and when I was looking around to choose the type of printers that I wanted to purchase, lots of people, oh no, that's a closed system. You can only use this kind of resin. Well, I haven't run into that problem at all. And really, really, what does that mean? Like, what is it really closing you off from? If you're able to use it to do the workflows that you needed to do for, it hasn't closed me off from anything. I haven't bought one single technology yet that's closed me off from anything. Maybe it's the stuff that I picked, but I'm just saying that it's more of a seller. It sounds like a seller thing to me.
I don't want to bash it by all means, so please don't misunderstand me. I've used it in the AG training center for many years. I like the things, what it makes, but I'm going to take from several customers the feedback about the Nextend 5100 in the Ceremel version. And I'm going to tell you what they probably, if they were sitting here now, would tell me. Well, it's a closed version. You cannot even put the generic resin in there. And if for some strange reason, the Ceremel version of the resin is not available, and you cannot even put the generic version, which is the exact same resin, just in a generic bottle, you're screwed, because now you can't produce. So that's maybe something to keep in mind. But if you, yes, you're absolutely right. If you can stick something else in there, if you cannot for some reason get your hands on material A, temporarily use material B until you can use A again because it became available. Great. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I guess that's a really good point. I never ran into that, but
what's the, how about the zirconia, what you're using?
So I tried a few different zirconias, and I'll kind of give you my pros and cons to it. Is initially I used the Zolid from AG, but at that time, I think it was like 6 years ago, I had a light curing unit that produced heat, and the Zolid crowns, the ones I used back then at 6 years ago, absorbed a lot of heat, and I would pull them out of the light box and they would crack. So I stopped using those just for that reason. Now, if you had a light cure unit that was LED or whatever, like they are now, or they're, more of them are like that now than they were ever before, you wouldn't have that issue. But that was a bit of a problem that I had with that. They still looked very good, but so then I moved into the Emax Zircad multi, and that was decent as well. But when they came out with the Emax Prime, I really liked that material. It was like almost an identical comparison. You couldn't even tell compared to Emax. And it had a gradient layer to it, which is better than more of a horizontal type layer too. So, and a lot of the fixed restoration work, I didn't want layering on them because I didn't want the chipping and the fracturing. Mm-hmm. So I wanted a monolithic zirconia. So, and in the green state, it was very easy to work with. That's another thing. I didn't get a lot of problems working with it during the green state either. So that's mostly what I use, is that the Emax Zircad Prime.
Yeah. Totally get it, because I've used it and I like it as well. There's some people which didn't really like the Prime too much for some strange reason. I don't really know. I haven't used all the different shades of it, but I've used A's and B's, and for me everything came out bang on. I like the difference in the chroma in it. What's there. I like that idea that it is a difference in the flexural strength towards the inside.
Yeah. That's a really good point, Richard. That was one of the other things I kind of thought was really neat. Like you could go, I think, all the way down to a 1200 MPa. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I can't quite remember now, but you could really, when you're nesting the tooth in the puck, you have a lot of control with that gradient layers at the top and the difference in the strengths, right? So if you were doing crowns and you wanted more translucency and you weren't really worried about the base strength of it, then you could nest a little bit higher, right? Now, if you were doing a bridge and you wanted more strength and you wanted less translucency, like let's say in the posterior, you can nest that thing deeper into the stronger layer of it. So it had really good light reflection, and it was just a nice material.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I love the Genx multi-layer and how that comes out. X is beautiful. Obviously, it's not strong enough for full arch cases, so your next option, or your only option, is the Gen X at that point. But yeah, so what I'm trying to clarify with this is, hey, you're using something else and it actually works, right? Because and to demystify that open closed, oh, I'm gonna give us a closed system. Yeah, no, it's not really. You
Yeah.
can stick a prime in there and still have fun with it.
Yeah, it doesn't know that you're milling prime.
Right.
Like if you choose the multi-layer option on there and you're choosing the same size of puck, it doesn't know what you're putting in there, and you know it doesn't care. And sometimes you might choose the wrong strategy and you might get a problem because of that, but then choose something different. And like for example, a lot of the substructures that I mill are pecton, and there's no pecton strategy in the nesting for the AG, but I just use peak natural, and it mills them beautifully. So it's not closed off to it, that's for sure, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm hearing a lot of good things about Pacton. I want to answer Mary's question here really quick, and then catch up on the Pacton and Trilore and Peak and all that jazz. So Mary asked if there's a transcription. There will be basically subtitles if you're later looking at the YouTube channel or at Facebook Live. It's not instantly there, but if you'll at a later point give it a day or something, go back to it, there's subtitles, but there's not a true transcription of it, no, unless you're typing it down and sharing for us. Yeah, so Trilore, Pacton, Peak, or Juvora, right? How the Amangabacha version is. I want to hear your opinion. I'm only really used to the Juvora Peak. I've built several of that in the training center because that's what I had access to when I was there. The Trilore, I'm not necessarily hearing the best things because of the fillers in there, both from customers with whatever reasons, and also from the scientific side, I'm being told too many fillers is not necessarily a good thing. And I'm hearing a lot of good things about the Pacton, and I would love to hear your perspective and why. And they make a pink version, I believe, too, meanwhile, right?
No, I don't think there's pink yet. So I tried Peak, I tried Trilore, and I tried Pecton. And I'll just quickly go through why I use more of the Pecton than I do the other ones. And I think it's up to the person what they're trying to accomplish and achieve. But so with Peak, just to get that one out of the way first, is its water solubility is higher, so it absorbs more bacteria or water. Where Pecton has an extra ketone polymer in it, so it's a lot denser material and it is stronger, and it also does mimic the modulus of elasticity of the cortical bone. So those were, and it was a good shock absorber. So those are reasons why I went with a biocompatible type material versus like if that's Trilore, if that's Peak, or that's Pecton. Those are the reasons I wanted to create some sort of shock absorber between the occlusal forces and the implant restorations. I wanted something with some form of modulus of elasticity, not flexible, but some form of a modulus of elasticity that would allow the system to work in unison. And I wanted the lightweightness of it. So and one of the things with the Trilore was that it was horizontally layered. So when I would mill a substructure, it could break off horizontally because of those fiber layers in there. Plus, you then had to then apply a secondary material to the bottom of it because it would absorb so much. So with the Pecton, I could put that directly against the tissue, and those were my goals, especially in those substructures. But one of the things I got to say about why more people like the Trilore over the Peak and the Pecton is because of its strength. But because you got more room for design flaw, for pre-planning flaws. Like it would be more popular for that reason and replacement of poorly placed implants, not enough bone reduction, like all these different mechanical factors that are in place. Now, when you use a material like Pecton, you can't just use it without any experience. There are some design parameters that it will break if you have too long of a cantilever. Like if you have anything more than one tooth past the last abutment, it's not a good solution. Like I wouldn't recommend that in the treatment plan. You literally have to, when you start the case, decide when you're creating the treatment plan that I'm going to use Pecton, that we have these kinds of bone levels and these bone qualities. We're going to place the implants in these positions, and we're not going to have any cantilevers that are too excessive for the Pecton. And then we're going to use that material. We're going to design it however you want to design it, but it all has to meet those protocols. And when you do that, it's a glorious material, because it's trying to restore that patient back to its natural state. And so far, with all of the materials that I've used, when you use that material properly and you design it properly and you case plan that case properly, you hear that from them. Like I've had them in the mouth and I take them off, I clean them regularly. There's no calculus buildup, and if there is, it just flips off. The material is wonderful if it's used correctly. It's almost like it needs its own workflow to use it. Like if you're going ahead and doing a design of a substructure, it has all these parameters in place already. And if you don't meet them, you can't use that material. And that would resolve a lot of things with it. And then maybe you need to go to a secondary material like Trilar, which is more water soluble, which has more fiber layering to it. So it is going to be more resistant to strength and fracture, to get more cantilever out of it. But then you have to do all these additional things. But that's why I choose Pecton over Peak.
Love it. Love it. And you're using zirconia crowns on top of your thimbles? Yeah,
I sure am. And they just, when you have the right parameters and you mill with the right stuff, it works out perfect. I think the other thing with Pecton as well that I want to say is, if you use a regular carbide burr to mill it, I don't think it's as successful as it is if you're using some sort of diamond coated burr. Because the diamond coated burrs mill it so effectively that when you sinter your crowns, they're just going to drop right on there perfectly on your thimbles. And your whatever copings, or if you're going direct, I don't know who's doing direct with Pecton to an MUA, but let's say you're cementing a coping in there, it's just going to fit on there perfectly. If you're using a diamond coated wet mill is what I do. I don't necessarily think that you get the accuracy that you need with a carbide burr and milling Pecton under, say, a Peak strategy. Using a Peak strategy.
Have you tried the single color, the yellow stripe ones?
No, I just used the diamond ones. And
I found that the yellow stripe ones are on Peak at least are good, but I've not milled Pecton, so I can't tell. But the yellow stripe ones, single colors, are great for Peak and for any temporary PMMA.
Well, I recognized early on that the Roto Pink 2.5 and the Roto Pink 1.5 used to mill the PMMA denture bases, they were all diamond coated. So I thought that material, it's hard, it's probably, and it was extremely accurate. Like you could take the teeth off the cars and they would just drop in there. So I'm like, well, there's got to be something to that. So I stopped using the carbide burrs and went with the diamond coated ones, and it worked brilliantly. And when you spend the extra money on the diamond coated burrs to mill hard stuff, it's like, it was weird when I used the carbide burrs before, I would have to calibrate the mill every 6 months, say, depends on the amount of milling you're doing. But I went an entire year just milling with those diamond burrs. And then when I went to do a calibration, it was perfect. So it costs a bit more money for them, probably double the amount of money for them, but you get longer life out of them, you get better results, and everything's more efficient because of it.
What's the selection when you're milling a thimble? Are you spending the extra time of milling those in HD, or are you saying yeah, right? So it's otherwise a bit of a pain. You have to seat the crowns on the thimbles, right? So it's yeah, it depends if you're fast doing that, if you don't mind, because I mean it's not the cement will fill that in, and if you don't mind, then that's okay, I guess. But if you have the time, you might as well, right?
Yeah, like I'm not doing the work. Like if I leave at night and it's doing the work, I don't care. I just put it in there. I'll mill it all night. You know, really my biggest concern is how productive am I going to be during the day assembling that restoration. And if I can just put it together like Lego and just get this perfect, accurate result and just move on and just do another one just as productive as the last one, well, then I don't care how long it takes. So I do mill it in HD. I do use the diamond burrs. I do wet mill it. And I try to, over the years, I've learned how to design Pecton. It's not the same as designing a chrome cobalt. It's not the same as designing a titanium substructure. It's not the same as, it's like somebody who designed full zirconia fixed restoration arches. You know, there's a way of doing that. There are certain parameters that you have to have so it doesn't break. It's the same with Pecton. It has its own feel to it. You have to have, you know what, you're gonna probably break one and then realize I can't do that. But it's not to say that that's necessarily the material's fault. It's just that you need more experience with that material. That, you know, I've always said to Taya at an extent that there needs to be some sort of workflow parameters for that material for it to be really successful. Other than that, it really relies on a lot of expertise to use it. And somebody who really respects the material, why you'd be using that, why you would want to use that on a patient.
Yeah, like an AP spread value would be helpful then, right?
But you know, if you get a case that has existing implants and there's nothing you can do, well, then Pecton is not your choice. You should go with a more durable type material. Now, you could choose Trilor, you could choose titaniums, you could choose chrome cobalts. You know, especially with the milling technology now, a lot of them are all, like, this one doesn't mill metal, but a lot of them are coming out that you can mill metal. So now you have even more options and more versatility to avoid those problems.
Awesome. Well, what's your selection for the material? Because you're doing zirconia monolithic as well, right? So how do you pick and choose? What are you going to do in Pecton with single crowns on it? I'm assuming it's single crowns because I know some people are combining them into like little bridges and whatever. What's the selection of it? Are you throwing the Pecton into the mandible because of the flex and the movements of the mandible, or what's your strategy?
So my strategy is to try to restore them back to their natural state as best as possible. And I really think that individual crowns give this individual realness to the restoration. So that's one reason why I choose the individual, but it's a lot of work and it's not very productive for large labs to do that. So sometimes they make units, and if you're not very accurate, you're not going to get all those individual crowns back into place properly. And there's a lot of problems associated with that. But the thing is, if a patient fractures or chips that individual crown, I just have to take one of those off and replace it with a new one. Where if you do a full monolithic zirconia fixed restoration and you chip a large tooth off, well, that's a very large restoration that you have to replace. So, you know, it's not as versatile. I don't believe. And
screw channels are not necessarily an issue. Angulations are not necessarily an issue because you're going to place a crown over it, right? So otherwise you would have an issue and have to angle the screw channels because something might stick out in the facial.
Yeah. I really am trying to, I'm trying to create a lightweight restoration. I'm trying to create a shock absorbing restoration. I'm trying to create a restoration that has some form of modulus of elasticity. I don't care
Getting
what
a call from Rapid Shape right now. I'm gonna call it back later.
I don't care what the name of that material is. That's what my goal was, right? And to give the patient this individual likeness of that. And, I want them to say, I don't even know that they are there, that these are just like my real teeth. I can feel them. They're great. Yeah. And plus, you want the long-term outcomes for the implants, and you want the long-term outcomes for the restoration. So, that's why, one of the things that if there is a negative that I don't like is, you have to layer it with composite.
Yeah.
And I don't think composite layering, although you can do a good job and it's nice, some of that porcelain that I see on those other substructure materials is very, very nice.
Yeah.
And it has a sheen to it, like a glazed crown that
how to accomplish with composite. Yeah.
It's very, very difficult to accomplish with composite.
Right.
So if there was a way that, a person could do that, that'd be great. But last time I know the furnace is a little bit too hot to put the pecton in for the porcelain.
Might just be a few degrees. Hey, so this wasn't, I was waiting for that callback, but I take it as an omen, and maybe looking at the time, seeing that we are already 47 minutes in. Are you up to showing us your printer and stuff?
Yeah, sure.
Not an product, but I know you love it. We've spoken about it a couple of times. Yeah, so I want to learn a little bit more about it, and yeah.
Sure. So when it came down to my choice, to purchasing the printer that I purchased was, I'd sent out a few models to a few different places with different printers and different concepts. And, first I wanted to check the accuracy of them all and how they printed and what the materials were like, obviously like everybody. But one of the main reasons I ended up choosing the Rapid Shape over some of the other ones. But, now you can also find some good systems out there that are integrated systems, I guess, and which make you very productive. Like, I didn't want to print something and always have to remove it from the build plate. Like, there were some important factors in some of the cases that I was doing that I wanted that to be cured on that build plate. So
totally with you on that.
Yeah. So
and we spoke a couple of times on over that on the next end. I did exactly the same thing. I know it's controversial with the orbital shaker. Some people say it doesn't clean well enough. I think it does if you know how to use it. And I just grabbed the whole build plate and stuck that in a big enough Tupperware with the isopropyl alcohol in it on the orbital shaker, going like this, right? Slushing it around, taking it out and curing the whole thing together before removing everything. So many advantages to that, including a cleaner workflow. No, not so much of a mess as if you were taking that resin dripping build plate and removing your stuff from it.
Yeah, and making you more productive.
Yeah.
So there's ways around being able to clean that model. You can put holes in there, like vent holes. You can lift it up. Like there's a lot of ways you can go with building that model so that you can clean it. So regardless of the name Rapid Shape, there was things that I wanted in a system. And one was I wanted to be able to light cure on a build plate. Like, for example, Ivoclar, they have that option too. There's lots of different systems out there that have that option. But I also wanted a unit that had a wash, so I could take, if I wanted to take my build off of the build plate and wash it, or wash it with the build plate. Plus, I wanted it to be able to wash the build plate after I was done with it. So, and this system had that option. I wanted it to have its own secondary isopropanol tanks. and one that monitored that as well, which this system does as well. It monitors the alcohol content in the isopropanol. As it gets lower, it measures that, so you know when you have to replace it. So that was part of the system that I wanted. And the light curing also, I wanted to be able to cure the builds on the light cure units. And I wanted the light cure unit to have a vacuum on it and to have the nitrogen option. And this had all of those options. And it was an integrated system. So from the time I did the nesting and I sent that to the printer, it would not only communicate with the printer, the build, but it would also communicate with the wash and the cure. So I could just rapidly advance from one system to the next. And
so when you're saying it communicates, it basically means it knows the material, it knows how long that material needs to wash, and it knows how long that material needs to cure.
Yeah.
And then pre-programs and selects the correct.
Yeah, and it has like in the nesting software, it has a long list of materials in there. Like say, for example, the photo denture resin.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it'll print that, and then it will wash and dry that. It has a longer drying cycle. Like they all have their each different cycles for the wash and the curing, obviously. So when you choose that material, and there's a lot of them, like it has Keystone, you know, the bite splint material, it has them all in there. When it's a fully integrated system. So it knows, like you say, Richard, what to wash. It washes it, dries it, and then it cures it. Yep. So, and to me, that was very, very productive. And I wanted that level of production. And they even have Rapid Shapes. I think the next printer up from the one I bought, because I got the 20, I think it's the 30 or the 40. It actually separates. It has a separating arm that separates the builds from the build plate, which also can be a pain in the ass sometimes when you're trying to do a lot of volume and get stuff finished, right? So that's one of the reasons I chose this system. Whatever the name was, it didn't matter, like the Pecton, right? It just happened to be those materials and those systems. So that's why I chose it. Just like the Ceramil system, it was capable of doing what I want to do. That's why I chose it.
Awesome. Tell me maybe, or tell us maybe, what your take is now that you can print a denture base. I mean, I know, teeth, you already said your opinion about that, and I'm 100% on par with that. It requires so much labor to make a printed denture look good, and it will never look as good as a colored teeth. But what about the base? It seems like a low-hanging fruit. You can print it a lot less expensive than if you would mill it. It's eventually faster even to print it. What's the good and the bad for you about it?
Well, the great thing about it is, you could print 4 denture bases, all the same time. One denture base would be the same to print as 4. And I use it, I don't use it for any of my permanent dentures. I find resin denture bases nothing compared to a milled denture base, especially if you're using diamond coated milled denture burrs. I just don't. It's a brittle type kind of resin material. It has different properties to it, and if you ever need to add tissue conditioner to it, it doesn't stick. It's good for other things, but it's not good for me when it comes to the final denture base. But and like Richard said, they're a lot of work. Like when you get a properly milled denture, say out of the AG system, you use a Vitabionic puck or the Ivotion, whatever you're choosing to use. Like that base is beautiful when it comes out of there. Like it is smooth. Like you could just high shine that. Like you could trim off your connectors, pumice that up a little bit and high shine that. That's it. There's no, it's completely different than the printed base.
Yeah, and the funny part is, and I didn't look at too many printed ones, but if you're comparing the printed specifications, just the numbers on paper, in theory, the printed resin has a very low, especially if compared to handmade stuff, a very low residual monomer in there. It has really good, just on point flexural strength, etc. But so you're reading and you're looking at those numbers and you're like, oh wow, this actually looks really good. But then for some strange reason, it's just not quite the same like a milled one. How about repairability for you? How's that working out with the printed ones versus the milled ones?
It's terrible. It's difficult. Like when you mill a puck, it's very, very dense because it's so compacted in there. There's a fraction of residual monomers as well. And it's just like a regular denture base. If you need to reline that, you can. If you need to repair it, you can. You can do whatever you want. You can adjust it. It's the same material. It's just that it's way, way better. There's no expansion and contraction when it's milled. Not like for example, let's say you had a patient that had no ridge on the bottom and you conventionally process that either injection or heat cured. You're going to get a ton of expansion and contraction because there's a large amount of acrylic in there. So it's going to fit even worse for that patient that has no ridge that needs it to fit better. But if you took a milled denture base and you milled that, there's no expansion and contraction in there. It's milled out of a solid state. Now, is there some discrepancy between the milling? If you're using a carbide burr, I think there is, but if you're using a diamond burr and wet milling, there's not much. So you get this perfect fit then with very little adjusting. So when it comes to the printed resin bases, I tried to repair. You know what? It was just a pain in the ass. It's very sellable, but the patient acceptance on it is poor. It's not great. And I don't think it'll ever be as good as somebody who's milling a denture buck. And now, since a lot of the mills are multi-changers, like the Matic, really, what difference does it make?
Can you explain a little bit more? If you're trying to repair it, what are you going to expect if you're trying to repair it? Layer separation, the repair resin's going to separate from it, or like what's?
Well, it doesn't stay.
Mhm.
Like let's say you took some acrylic, right, and you mix it up a little bit runny. Well, it's not going to stay there. Like there's techniques for you to keep it in one place, or you can use it thicker or salt and pepper, whatever you want to do. But it has some, or you can blow on it and blow out some of the monomer and it'll kind of stay, right?
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to get print resin to stay somewhere? I guess you could kind of like hold it with one and then like here the same, like, I don't know. Yeah, you know, maybe there's lots of people out there that have lots of experience with print resin and repairing it. I don't. So to me, when I tried to repair it, it was hard. And, you know, my handheld light curing unit wasn't the same wavelength as the resin I was using. So it wouldn't even cure while I was trying to hold it in one place. So then I would try to put it in the light box and it was like be all over the place. It was just, I thought, you know what, forget it. I'll just mill the stuff.
And cold curing repair monomer polymer on the printed resin just won't bond right.
It's not good. There's like a massive join line there and it doesn't look great.
Yeah.
It just,
so realigning or any
so
of those
time.
things just can't really happen.
Right. I spent so much time screwing around with that and having it break. Right. And then the patient acceptance was low on that. I don't even care anymore if it's X amount of dollars for me to mill a denture baser at $50 and it comes out of there perfectly like that. And that patient is happy and it doesn't break. And I know if I do have a problem, I can fix it easily. I'll take that any day.
Yeah.
Because really, you could print that for $5 or you could mill that for $50. I'll take the $45. For my own peace and sanity.
Yeah.
You're going to waste that on other areas, I guess. It's just my opinion, but that's what I think.
Totally. Look how easy we filled an hour now.
Yeah, easy. It's good.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's fun having you on here. I might maybe get you on for something else. I know you're doing a whole bunch of, I'm gonna carefully say crazy stuff without calling you crazy, but fun stuff. You know, when I get a call from you usually or a WhatsApp, it's challenging. It's when that stuff's fun to me, right? It's
Yeah.
different than the, oh, what do I do here? Where I'm like, do this, shake it out of your hands somehow and answer it. I like the challenges, and you certainly push the limits with the stuff what you're doing. So you've been doing partial design with the
Yep.
Dendro module. I know you're milling doughs, and
Yeah.
I know you have some great workflows with Facebooks and
Yep.
um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've created pretty much anything that you can think of analog, I've be able to create in the mill. So anybody that says that AG is a closed system is, I don't know. You might have to try to figure those workflows out for yourself or pay for them, one or the other, right? To pay to get that experience, which I think is a lot cheaper than it is for you to try to figure it out on your own, because, I wasted tons of money and time trying to figure these things out. But, once you get them, you just keep doing it over and over again because the technology is there, right? You just have to tell it what to do. But anyway, Richard, it was a good time. It went fast, a lot faster than I thought it would.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to see if there's any questions, and if not, I had a peek at the Facebook, but it looks like there's no questions. If you guys are, I don't know where you're joining, on which Facebook group and or on the YouTube channel or here on Zoom, obviously, type your questions in if they're awesome. If I'm missing them now because we're closing it down, perfectly fine. I'll take a look and I'll get back to those. You can tag me in it if you want. And I'm always looking for topics
There's a
of
question.
interest. Oh, there is one. Yep. Quick question about all-in-4 digital design. Sure. So Roger, do you want, if you want, I can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself, or you can type it, whatever you prefer. Might be typing. Yep, he will type it. All right. All right, then, yeah, what I meant to say, but it's your typing, Roger. What I meant to say is, I'm always looking for topics of interest, and or if you think, hey, I would love to be on this, can you have me as a guest or something? Why not? Shoot me an email. My email is
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, I can.
So I've been talking to this one doctor, and they do all-in-4 conversions, but they do everything through digital design. And they were talking about how it's called this pick camera.
Yes.
Where you put dominoes onto the implants, and it takes a photo scan of the placement, and then you merge it to the model. And then my question is, how accurate is that, or how different is that than from just telling the software itself that with the models or with the model analogs that's where they are? I don't know if that makes sense.
So there's right now two systems out there. You got the iMetric and you got the PIC system out there. They're both photogrammetry.
Right.
They're not inexpensive, but they're very well perceived because they're very accurate. Both of them. I believe that both of them should be 5 micron. It could be 4 micron. I would have to go to their website to validate that statement. But the difference is basically if you're taking a digital impression, it depends on the intraoral scanner you're using. It depends on the strategy of the person scanning. It depends on how much tissue is in between those scan bodies, how it's all stitching it together, how much coffee you had in the morning. It's the same thing if you're doing an open tray or closed tray impression. You have all those variables in it. It depends on how accurate your model system is. Yeah, and then ultimately on how accurate your desktop scanner is, what you're picking everything up with. On the photogrammetry, you can basically eliminate those things, and you know it has that accuracy. There is not everything perfect with it. I think room sometimes is an issue with those. If there's just not enough room to get all the dominoes, how you call them, in there.
Right.
But I think they're well perceived and very accurate.
Because the way we used to do something similar when I used to work at Zimmer Biomet for bar design, you would put little caps on each multi-unit head or whatever head you had, and a vertex machine would measure 4 points on each angle of that multi-unit abutment, and it would populate 4 numbers, and then you would send it over to Copycat at that time, and then you would merge it together and design it that way. I'm sure it's the same concept now that you use scan caps or whatnot.
I'm not sure. I'm having a little bit of a struggle of picturing how that exactly works. But photogrammetry is cool. You can actually, if you there's several apps on it. You can look at the App Store or Google that. There's photogrammetry and LiDAR, and I think we will hear a lot more from both of them in the future.
Right.
LiDAR is not quite there yet, but I think that will eventually, when the devices are getting better, maybe not a handheld like a phone, but an actual device. I think that has some real potential. And the photogrammetry, for sure, you can take your phone and with photogrammetry turn a household object into an STL file and replicate it relatively well. It's just a question of well, how steady is your hand? Are you using a tripod? Is it,
Correct.
What's your camera? And blah, blah, blah.
So I guess to close, if you didn't have that piece of gear or whatever you want to call it, it wouldn't hinder your restoration in the long run, as opposed to having it.
No, I don't necessarily think it hinders it. I mean, those full-out cases, and I'm very eager to hear what Tanner has to say about it. But photogrammetry is relatively new and hasn't been around for all those decades. But those full-out cases have been done without it, and there's many successful cases which went into patients' mouths and have been accepted and worked successful. It's just more variables in your procedure, what you're going through, what you have to deal with.
Right.
Okay. And so the photogrammetry basically eliminates many of those variables. So you have a more process secure workflow, I would say, right? Tanner, what do you think?
I think the photogrammetry really ties everything together because it is very accurate. Obviously, like it's, some of the new intraoral scanners are also extremely accurate, and there are workflows that you can create to do a full fixed arch cases with those cameras. But just for somebody who doesn't want to really, or doesn't understand how to push that to create those parameters, then you could just use the photogrammetry instead, which would be a more streamlined workflow to create that same kind of accuracy. And I think it's more accurate than, like Richard said, than any of the fixed arch restoration cases that were out there that were done analog. Because there's lots of areas in doing a fixed restoration analog where you lose accuracy. So I think by using the PIC system or the other one, you're integrating all of that technology together in a very accurate manner. So like really talking about the accuracy at that level it's beyond human. Like it's like how good is perfect, right? It's really,
and right away if something's off, because the software will tell you and let you instantly basically know if something went wrong with it or if it was successful. So you don't have to go through all the hundreds of steps of what you normally have to go through just to find out that your restoration ended up not fitting or making your verification jig and it doesn't work.
Right.
Or it breaks.
Yes.
Well, thank you for that.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So the last thing, I guess, what I was just about to say is my email address. If you have topics you want to send over, or suggestions, feedback, anything's appreciated. There's also a link which I didn't prepare this time. I'll let you know what that link is the next time, where you can make suggestions for topics, etc. For now, you can just email them at richard@opulentcadcam.com. And I hope I see you on next Friday again here. And Tanner, thank you very much for doing this, for joining here. And I hope that was fun, and hopefully we will repeat this.
Yep. See you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.